Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne,
Welcome to Empowered Now,
where we save humanity
one relationship at a time.
We all struggle from time to time connecting with and understanding others and ourselves.
So we hope to encourage you to live a more authentic and empowered life by sharing what we've learned as coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Now is LGBTQ2IA, alternative lifestyle, poly, and kink friendly.
Thanks for joining us
And enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 10. We have a very special guest with us today on Empowered Now. She is a psychotherapist, public speaker, trauma specialist, and author of what I consider the #1 resource in poly relationships, the book Polysecure. Welcome, Jessica Fern. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you to be here with you.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So excited to meet you. I must confess to a bit of fanboyism happening right now.
Both of us.
Your book had a significant impact on my life, and I really appreciate you taking the time to put it out there and to write it and stuff. So it's been powerful. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And then it's venues like this that sort of spread the word, and that's just as important. So thank you.
It's so great. I saw an interview that you did with Eve Rickert and the other lady who wrote a section of the foreword. Is that
Nora.
correct?
Yeah, Nora.
Yeah. Yes. And so I saw that interview before the book was released. And I was like, I have to have that. And I have to have it as soon as it's out. So we were one of the first pre-orders, and
Awesome.
So happy it picked up right after that. And we've been recommending it to all of our clients who are poly and some who aren't actually too. So
yeah,
very, very useful.
That's been one of the nice surprises is people are like, this is not even just for poly folks, right? Like
Yes.
everyone needs to hear some of this stuff.
And it's so practical. A lot of the book really applies to like practical solutions to issues that are ongoing and permeate lots of aspects and layers of a relationship. And so, that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. It's not just theory, but it's application.
Yeah, and that was a big point of it as well. But we're actually working on a workbook that will come out later this year to even make it a little more practical, walk you through the steps of some of the chapters that are more theoretical, right? How do I apply them to myself? So, yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
love
I can't wait for
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be signing up for that one for sure.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions for you.
Great.
Some of these are from the community. Some of these are from our own personal perspective. So it's great to have you here as a resource to kind of bounce these ideas around a little bit more. And also, feel free to say, that'd be great to go back to the book and check out. The book is great to have and to reflect back to frequently. I do that all the time. In fact, I'm even in a book club, and it's a poly book club called Relationship Geeks, and we're working our way through it. So it's fantastic. Okay, so my first question is, a lot of the poly community, I think, really needed this book, and they feel kind of like the attachment styles speak to them in a way that sort of makes what our responses are in relationships so much more understandable, so much more manageable. And what was the sort of point where you were like, this has to be a book? I'm writing a book now. When did that happen for you?
When did that happen? It happened talking to Eve, actually. It was over 2 years ago. I was at Southwest Love Fest, and Eve had a booth that was, you could sign up and pitch her ideas. And I had 3 different ideas. And it was a colleague of mine who also encouraged me. They're like, you have to go talk to Eve. She's looking for new authors, So I did it. And in talking with her, I was like, okay, I've got this one idea. I've got this attachment idea. I've got this other idea. She's like, I love them all. There's nothing on attachment and non-monogamy. Like, that's sort of what is needed, like, now. But it was needed like years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then And then in that weekend, was when I was giving a talk on attachment and non-monogamy. And it wasn't the first time I gave it, but it was sort of the biggest venue. And I could just see in that context too, like how hungry people were and how appreciative people were, and the different ways, like other types of talks, people come up and say things afterwards. And this, I was like flooded with like, in a different way than other talks. So I could just see like, oh, people are responding to this in a big way. Like I'm on to something here, and I need to share it. It can't just be, a few hundred people at a time in a conference that not everyone has, access to.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get like I get goosebumps when I hear that story. Like I do, because I agree. Like people in the community, I mean, for me, it was eye-opening. Like it was impactful, incredible to understand attachment styles and how they relate to poly specifically, or consensual non-monogamy, which we'll get into in a second. But I think that was really impactful for me, and it was really just it provided a lot of clarity around how I relate and what my connections are like and why I am the way I am, right? And so that was beautiful. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Speaking of the consensual non-monogamy piece, can you explain why you use the term consensual non-monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy?
I love this question. And it kind of has a few layers. I think the first, more superficial layer is I was just sort of following suit. Like publisher liked it, but the American Psychological Association now has a task force for consensual non-monogamy. So like that term being used in a huge way, right? And they did a lot of process around what term do we use. So, and I have colleagues that are on that task force. So it's sort of just like, yeah, that's the term to use, right? But if I go a little deeper with it, so instead of using ethical non-monogamy, there's a few issues I can see with that term. And one is that everyone is not necessarily doing ethical non-monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
It sometimes is consensual and it's not necessarily ethical, right? For some people, being non-monogamous has nothing to do with ethics for them or moral. It has to do with like orientation, right? And so I want to make sure that the word I'm using captures that like some people are not thinking about their ethics or morals. They still want to do it ethically, right? But that's not their reason, right? It's not a philosophical reason necessarily. It's because this is who they feel themselves to be. And then there's more maybe specific to some communities I've been in and out of. But there's certain communities who sort of have an arrogance that non-monogamy is a superior way to practice relationships, that they literally more evolved. Right? And they're using this ethical, superiority, arrogance to sort of beat people down, right? And it's like, that's not how I want to relate to this, right?
Yeah.
So that, I realized those things informed using consensual non-monogamy, which I think just has a more neutral impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great.
You.
I love
Thank
that.
you for that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think for me too, what came up for me when I ran across the term consensual non-monogamy was the idea that consent is very black and white. It's either there or it's not. And ethics, as you alluded to earlier, can be somewhat ambiguous, and it's not always the same for everybody. So it kind of removes that bit about, well, is this ethical? Isn't it ethical? Well, is it consensual or is it not consensual? That's really what it comes down to, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And in consent also implies transparency. Right. So, and those two things are very important to me. So that's why when I saw that, I was like, yes, okay, consensual non-monogamy. It's interesting too, because as I start to relate to other people, and I use C&M for short, right? As I'm explaining, I'm poly/C&M. They're like, what's C&M? And so it's an opportunity to educate, right? It's an opportunity to sort of expand somebody's vocabulary. And everybody I've ever talked to about it goes, oh yeah, wow, I can totally see that. Yeah, so it's catching on.
Yeah. And I think too, right, what you're pointing to is like, we're still in the phases of this where we have to distinguish it from cheating. right? And that's usually a part of that education process. Oh, this isn't cheating,
No.
right? And that's where that consent piece is so important.
Well, and for me too, I think, just a kind of reminder of the fact that for much of the world, especially in religious communities, there is no such thing as ethical non-monogamy, right? And so it's a barrier to even conversation, right? So by removing that questionable word, it just solidifies, I think, where the community can find its footing and be kind of firm in that. And I do find that there's a little bit of gatekeeping, like you were saying about the superiority. I think there's also a little bit of that in the community too. Like, that's not non-monogamy, or that's not polyamory because it's not ethical. But we know that people do practice it non-ethically, like you said, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
It still is for that person. It's just their version of it isn't meeting the ethics that you prescribe to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when working with partners, often we have to negotiate or figure out, almost assess, like, oh, you two are coming at this differently from an ethical perspective, and how do we get you, bridge that gap?
Absolutely. So important.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the attachment styles themselves, what are some misconceptions that people have about them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, well, people think probably secure is good. I think that's the easy generalization. That's the goal in a lot of ways. Or maybe I don't know if they think it's boring, right? They think that the avoidant dismissive style is like a narcissist. That's usually, the bad stereotype that goes there. Misconception, or that they don't want relationships, or that they can't do intimacy at all, right? So they get a big negative label in that way. The preoccupied anxious, they get written off as needy, clingy, borderline personality disorder. Like, that's the extreme. And then the disorganized or fearful avoidant is like, oh, just don't even go near that. That's right. That's a disaster, right? That's what it's seen as, right? Yeah, I mean, right. We can all wave our hands and be like, yeah,
I'm
know
just gonna
that.
excuse myself. I'm
right?
out of here because I'm
right. Right. You're broken. You can't do relationships.
Right.
That's
I'm
sort
fucked.
of,
No hope. Yep.
yeah, exactly. That's sort of the misconception. Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully I demystify, or, spoke to those misconceptions that this isn't necessarily how it is, and people aren't essentialized into these attachment styles that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Well, I know for me, obviously I resonated more with the fearful avoidant, hence the reaction when you mentioned that. But for me, it was liberating. I found a freedom in it when I discovered that. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Because that whole, now I have knowledge and information about myself that I didn't have before.
Right.
And so now when people ask me, and what my attachment style is, I say, fearful, avoidant, and secure, because there are times when I'm both. There are times when I'm more one than the other. It depends on where I'm at in the relationship, or who I'm with, or you know what I mean? Like, it's not static.
Exactly.
It's not,
Yeah. I mean, I'm a similar way. Majority of the time I am showing up or insecure, and then that fearful avoidant with certain stressors. It's not all of them, but certain ones, it's like, ooh, But now I know, okay, I'm doing it. I'm pulling back, and now how do I take one step forward? Right? How do my partner and I know, okay, what are the things that come up for both of us in those sticky moments, and what's the best way to hold each other? Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you guys wanted to unpack around that?
No, I think that's great. And there's more in the book.
Yeah, there's tons more in the book.
People, get the book.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Slower. There we go.
That's my Vanna.
There.
Is it backwards like it is on my screen?
No.
It looks great to me. So
yeah,
that's good. Perfect. So boundaries are really like, obviously boundaries are super important in any relationship, but I think they're magnified in importance when it comes to consensually non-monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
So we know that we need to set them. And boundaries are all about what we will or won't do, and how to treat us, kind of thing. But what are the problematic types of boundaries in your experience?
Yeah. Problematic is, when they go into the extremes where it's too porous or too rigid.
Mm-hmm.
When it's too porous, right? Either I'm, inserting myself too far into you. I have porous boundaries and I'm too much in your business, your space, right?
Yep.
Psychologically, energetically, physically, right? Or too porous where people are impacting, like I don't have my own thoughts and opinions or desires, right? I'm letting other people's opinions, thoughts, desires become mine, right? Or even just other people's feelings, right? Oh, these mine, yours, I don't know, right? So that's the porous boundaries, which become really problematic. And especially if we're looking at couples who have been monogamous and now they're opening up
Mm-hmm.
to something like polyamory. And there's just, because of the nature of monogamy, there's a lot of porous boundaries when you've been living with someone for a decade or more and it's just been the two of you. Oh, how do we actually start to create healthy boundaries with each other again? But then rigid boundaries as well, where I'm not letting enough out and I'm also not receiving enough in. There's not enough input and output. I'm not accessible. I'm maybe too pulled back, too boundaried off, right?
Mhm.
Or too inflexible. That boundaries are so important, but they also are not in a vacuum, right? There's a lot of situations where there can be nuance and negotiation. Can I engage with that flexibility or not? Yeah.
Mm.
So the rigid boundaries usually are really about protection. I talk about this connection and protection is sort of what we need both of. And so rigid boundaries are focusing too much on protection at the expense of connection, whether that's connection with myself or other. And then porous boundaries are being too connected to other and not appropriately protected, right? So it's the balancing of those two.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like the porous lends itself really well to a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
And if you're a couple transitioning into polyamory or a CNM, that can be really challenging because you're so tied up, like you were saying, in someone else's world that as soon as they're absent, it feels like you have no world.
That's a great way of saying it. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. That so much of your world is usually defined about being together and the couple. And then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know who I am or who we are if it's not that. Yeah.
Yeah. And identity is really important, but our autonomous identity is an important element to develop when you're transitioning out of a codependent couple relationship into something like this, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see it as one of the biggest challenges with couples specifically transitioning is um, a lot of the ways they were codependent were just totally invisible. And non-monogamy is a gift in that it kind of exposes all of it, but you're like, shit, this
yeah,
is
like,
a lot of work, right? Like, oh, here it is.
yeah.
I call
You know?
with my clients, I call that moving the furniture. Right, you're moving the
Yeah,
furniture and you're seeing all the dust, the bunnies and stuff that you haven't tended to in years sometimes, right? And so
right.
poly forces you to sort of move the furniture and kind of rearrange things in the room, and then you're like, oh shit, okay, well, there's a lot of stuff here that we have to tend to.
Yeah, or like the carpet's a different color over here than it is here, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right, that's
whoa.
great, I love that. That's great. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, we got fade but no fade. What do we do with the carpet now? Oh shit.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a new carpet.
Right.
Fuck it,
We
just
need
get a
an
new one.
entire new
We're done.
carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just moving forward through the book, kind of, I tried to put this in order. I don't know if it's in order, honestly. But you gave us a diagram about the different types of relationships. And I think it was really helpful in that it kind of placed people on the page. It's on page 110 if you're interested in following along. So you noted, there we are. You noted that you might place your own relationship somewhere else, even though it has the same terminology or the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, I think it was just me wanting to not say this is a rigid typology and the way I'm saying it is the way it is. Right? Because I've learned that people call themselves polyfidelitous or polyamorous, and that could like look so many different ways.
Right.
You know, or people call themselves solo polyamory, which typically means I don't live with my partners, I'm not financially entwined, but they're living with their partners, you know, and yet they still, you know, define themselves as solo polyamorous. So it was more just wanting people to have the flexibility of self-defining with a guidepost of what I was giving, right? Yeah, and a launch pad of conversation, right? You know, two partners might think, okay, yeah, we're this, but where they would each put themselves would look a little higher or a little lower, maybe even in the same quadrant. But why am I a little more to the left or right than you? You know? Yeah.
That's a great idea for an exercise for people who are looking at that. Yeah, I love that so much.
Going in the workbook.
Nice.
Yay! I can't wait.
Yeah, we did something like that, and for me personally, the term anarchy doesn't resonate with me. It represents chaos to me, and I'm not about chaos. I'm very much an orderly person. So when we were sitting down and talking about this, because we kind of did this idea of where are we at in terms of, you know, on this diagram and chart and whatnot, and the term that came up for me was autonomy, relationship autonomist.
I like that.
Yeah, so for me it was about having autonomy to make decisions for myself in my relationships as individual relationships versus you know, anarchy, which again, and it's probably a semantics thing, but when I hear the word anarchy, I literally get a little anxious, because then it implies to me that there's a lack of responsibility there.
Yeah.
I can just do whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm an anarchist, right? You know, that's what anarchy is, right? You can just, you know, create chaos all over. And I understand why the term exists, but for me, autonomy felt just more, it was more in alignment for me, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I understand why the term came about, and yet the word anarchy has a lot of stigma associated to it, and in some ways is the antithesis of what people think of as ethical, right? It not right. So there's this like confusion, I think, a lot of times. So I really like what you're saying of relationship autonomy.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, for me, when I first heard that term, I don't apply it as much to my romantic relationships, but it like applies to the rest of my relationships. I have a lot of unusual family of choice. You know, like my stepdad that technically never married my mom when I was 14 is still like my primary father figure and is the grandfather to, you know, like relationships like that you're like that. And I have several of those that people that are like just as important. And if you meet me in a romantic context, it's like, yeah, I'm a package deal. Like, you know, there's these people in my life that aren't romantic, but they're like partnerships, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Talking a bit about the mono-poly relationships, there's a lot of people out there that say that can't work, quote unquote. And I'm just curious to know what your experience is with that.
I see it all. I see situations where, it's not going to work at all. People are wanting just two fundamentally different things, and there's nothing wrong with either of them for wanting what they want or feeling even that is just who they are or what they're capable of, right? And it does end a relationship, you know, but I do have pairings that it works, you know, and sometimes that's because you have the person who's more monogamous is just okay, you know, they're content with where they're at, they don't want other partners, and they just don't experience jealousy with their partner being with someone else. And it's rare, but it does happen. You know, I've seen it happen. So, or they're grateful because there's someone who might be more recluse and is actually like, yeah, I would love to be like your 60% partner, with you. Like, great, go get those needs met elsewhere. They don't have to like be put on me. Yeah, yeah. But it's definitely can be a very difficult or relationship ending pairing. And yet I have actually seen and worked with people where it works beautifully for them.
And I would think too, there would be some more monogamous partners who have jealousy, but manage it, right?
Yeah.
They are able to find the tools and the ways to deal with it. So it's not such a barrier for being in the relationship.
Yeah, they're able to deal with it. There's certain, I'm thinking of a couple that I work with, and one of the partners is multiple partners, the other one is monogamous. And for her, the monogamous partner, she just really needs to be included in a lot of the dialogue. Like that's where the jealousy gets taken care of. It's not a don't ask, don't tell. She does want to be included in this experience, and it works. Yeah, it's working.
That's great. One of the things that I really feel comfortable with when I recommend Polysecure to people is that I have read other resources that have negative views of the poly-mono relationship, or they have had, difficulties like Eve has said about her own work, right, with her previous partner in more than two. And so some of the resources that I've read, like The Ethical Slut, there's still really good information in there, and it's a great sort of starter pack. But when I recommend Polysecure, I feel really great about it because there's nothing in there that is too rigid. Like what you were saying earlier, you do come across very much as, please understand that you can create your own relationship however it looks, and that it's okay to feel however you feel. And that continual permission throughout the book is so relaxing as a reader. And it allows me into the material more, I think. I, as a former teacher, I understand the use of labeling, and why attachment style labels would be, like Greg experienced, a relief to some, and kind of like providing understanding about where they're at. And then for other people, it might be feeling really limiting. And like we talked about, they're not set in stone and they are fluid, so you can move in and out of them. But even that perspective that you offer, that you can move in and out of them, is so wonderful. It's so fantastic. So thank you. Thank you for that. That's just part of why it's such a great resource.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you experienced it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that's unfortunate because it's not even like I invented the idea that our attachment styles changed. It's like research even shows that, that especially with monogamous folks, where most of the research is done, that your attachment style can change from partner to partner every few years within the same relationship, right? But I think what I really saw in non-monogamy was, ooh, you're having 2 or 3 different attachment styles at the same time. Right?
Yes.
Because of your different partnerships, and that is potentially very confusing and difficult, right? If you don't know how to even language what's happening for you. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I noticed too was other resources put the responsibility for having insecurities on the person having the insecurity.
Yeah.
And never really kind of takes the spotlight to kind of shine on their partner and what their behavior is and what they're providing as a partner. And I think that was really useful when you brought that up, as you're not in this alone. You have a partner, and you can advocate for your needs and have a dialogue, and your partner can participate in helping you feel more secure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I see it go all different ways. I think in the poly non-monogamous communities, there can be this hyper independence. Like if you're feeling anything, it's just your shit, go deal with it, right?
Yeah.
and people feel really problematized, pathologized, isolated because of that, right? And then I've seen in some of the actual more monogamous literature where it's almost like, oh, there's too much emphasis on this co-regulation, which is so important, but like it's only your partner's responsibility. You know, it's like there has to be this medium here of knowing, you know. In one of my jealousy presentations, you know, I asked like finding the roots of your jealousy and asking, is it coming from me, we, or society? Right. And that in any moment, right, like really, is this just my stuff? Is this just past triggers, past traumas that are getting projected into the moment? Or is this relationship needs or relationship mistreatment that's actually causing this eruption in me, right? And none of the amount of working on me is going to solve what really is a we issue, right? Or is it, you know, societal, where I've internalized certain ideas about femininity, masculinity, what it means to be a partner, right? That are what jealousy is and isn't, right? That are creating these experiences. And usually it's not just one, you know, it's going to be a combination.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Honey?
Yeah. I'm writing that down.
He's taking notes.
That's some powerful shit right there. Thank you. So one of the things that really stood out to me, and maybe it's because I'm an acronyms guy, but I really love the acronyms hearts. It really, really impacted me. And then taking it a step further, you also kind of showed a practical way to use it in the book. It's like a guide to sort of create secure conditions for basically connecting better, relating better to other people. I'm really curious, how did you come up with it and why?
Yeah, I came up with it, and my first acronym like wasn't even a word. It was like prepares. Like it just didn't. It was like PAPRQ. You know, like made no sense. And I was like, what? I'm like sitting with. I had to sitting with it. It was like, okay, hearts, perfect. We're talking about love, right? You know, yeah, because I knew I couldn't stand in front of people, because this started first as a talk, right? Or write for people and just be like, so do attachment better. Like there had to be something, right? Like, here's how your attachment gets all wonky when you're non-monogamous, then just, you know, don't do that. Like that's not helping people, right? Or it's raising awareness, but it had to give more than that, right? And so much of the issues I found personally even was that when I was going through things, okay, how do I do this in my relationships? So many of the prescriptions were like, oh, non-monogamous folks can't do half of these things, right? And so they're going to listen to these resources, which if you're monogamous are great, you can do all of those things, but it doesn't work for the non-monogamous community. So I felt like I had to give some, you know, roadmap, and that felt really important to make it practical, like you two were saying in the beginning.
Yeah, that practicality was incredibly helpful. Like I said, when I saw the hearts thing, I latched onto it. Like, you know, I don't want to give too much away because I want folks to read the book, obviously. But for me, it had a huge impact on me, like much like the attachment style stuff did. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for putting that work in, and thanks for making it, you know, a nice word that relates to love and all of that stuff instead of papaqua or whatever you had before. You know, right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
So much easier to remember.
Right. It's so much. And I like the idea of saying, go heart yourself, right? Because the last thing, the S, the secure attachment with self, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, because the S, right? The S is the secure attachment with self, right? For sure. Go heart yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually, in the book club, one of the hosts created a worksheet all about hearts.
Amazing.
On a jam board, which I'd never used before, but it's a collaborative board where you can share Post-it notes with each other. And basically, yeah, that's what we did, is we answered questions about each of what hearts stands for, and went through it and talked about our own relationships, what we need more of. It was great. Super eye-opening.
That's great. Yeah, the workbook is sort of going to have like a chart of that with different questions.
Great.
you know, for you, what you already have, what you need more of, what's your request. And then our publisher, my publisher is making some kind of poster of it too. So it'll be fun to see what that looks like, right?
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Oh, me too. So the next question is, you identified that when we're too reliant on the structure of a relationship for security, that can be problematic. And I really resonated with that. I've been married 4 times, divorced 3, obviously. And, you know, the structure of marriage to me has always appealed. But why? Right? And what is it that serves me from that structure? And even, you know, Greg and I, when we met, we were poly. We became monogamous for a time because we recognized that we were having jealousy issues and got married. And as soon as we were married, I was like, okay, let's do poly. Like,
I feel secure.
Yeah, that's what I needed. Thanks. Okay, good. I got the ring there. See?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a real marker, right?
Yeah.
And this was a great reminder to me that, oof, you know, it is serving that purpose for me in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
So what's your experience been with clients or personally that you kind of, you know, recognized that and saw that it was a problem for people?
Yeah, I think, you know, I would see people who came in and they had all of the structural bench posts, you know, all the structural securities that you could think of, right? And they didn't feel great, right? And they were still struggling, right? And I realized, oh, you have like, and they thought they were secure. And they would say, we thought we were secure. But then I'd start asking, well, did he listen to you before you opened up? No, he never listened to me. Oh, interesting. Right? So a lot of these challenges aren't just first arising now that you're opening up, right? They actually were there, but you could ignore them or tolerate them or just defer to the structural security to say we're good, you know? So I started to see that. And then when it became, okay, let's nothing wrong with structure, but let's focus on your relational experience to feel more secure in your hearts and in your bodies and how you're treating each other and showing up for each other, then something actually shifted. You know, and I think we see this a lot with like friends who like aren't doing well in the relationship and they like want to increase commitment or have a kid and you're like, oh, don't, you know, that like like increasing structure usually doesn't make things better actually, right?
But that's the first thing that people almost, well, I won't say the first thing, but it's one of the first things that a lot of people go to.
It is, because I think there's such a emphasis on it societally for one, and there are aspects of it that work. Like I don't want to poo-poo structure, you know, like there was a certain, you know, personally even there was a certain anxiety, like anxious experience I'd have. You know, my husband is a nature photographer and then we couldn't talk and it would be very sporadic because he like wouldn't have service. So it was like, and then there was just this, I don't know, like, is it just that you don't have service or that you like died taking a photo off a cliff or that you're ignoring me? Like, it was just this, you know, these different, like, what is going on, right? And when we moved in together, like almost all of that just went away. And I didn't move in with him because I needed to feel more secure. We moved in because we felt like that was the evolution of our connection and relationship. But I then retrospectively was like, oh, that's interesting. We increased some structure and some of my anxiety went down.
Right.
So, you know, like it's not that it doesn't serve, it does. You know, but if I wouldn't rely on that for our secure attachment.
And that's some of what you were saying, Leanne, is that, you know, when we got married, that increased, that your anxiety around certain things decreased, right? Would that be a fair statement to make?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It was like, it's way more expensive to leave me now. So
it's way more of a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah.
So I at least know there'll be another conversation before
yeah. Exactly.
At least know I'll have to get his stuff.
Right. I'll have to come back for my shit at least.
Exactly.
Right? But it's interesting because like Leanne, I've been married I've been married 4 times and divorced 3 as well. And so it brought up a lot of stuff for me too. And that I depended a lot on relationship structure, a lot. And that escalator idea, right?
Yeah.
You meet, you date, you get engaged and da 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 da, right? And so my whole life, I won't say I identified as non-monogamous, but when I look back on my life, I recognize that I was non-monogamous, consensually or otherwise.
Yeah.
And so for me, opening my life up to this idea that you can do it consensually was really, really important to me.
Yeah.
And that structure piece was important to me as well, to have that foundation.
Yeah.
Right? I recognized I needed that foundation, and that actually leads to the next question because of that secure base.
Yeah.
Right? That idea of having a secure base, being fearful avoidant and all of that stuff really provided me with the security that I was looking for in a relationship, right? And then speaking of which, you do talk about safe havens and secure bases. Do you mind explaining the difference between the two? And then also maybe give us an overview of how it might apply to poly and CNM?
Yeah, so safe haven is sort of just what it sounds like, right? Where can I turn to you and be safe? You are a safe haven to me, where I'm received by you, I get comfort, there's acceptance, there's no judgment, there's love, right? And I can let my guard down, I can be me in front of you, and it's safe. Huge, right?
Yeah,
I can share myself with you. I can admit certain things or share myself, and you are there with me, basically, right? And then secure base is more of the I can turn away from you and you'll still be there when I come back, but you encourage me to take risks, to go explore the world, to be big, and when we feel that sense of I have someone here with me, people are more likely to take professional risks, even ask for raises, like do certain things that they want to do, but they have never felt as emboldened to do. So I see it as like safe haven is, will you receive me as I am, and love me as I am, and secure base is, and will you encourage me to grow beyond who I am?
That's brilliant. I love that.
It is both. Yeah.
I love that.
And so often in monogamy, we're expecting one person to do all of that, which is a high task. Right? In non-monogamy, what's really cool is our relationships can have elements of both, or more one, more the other. Oh, I had someone say, yeah, that's my safe haven partner, that's my secure base partner, and it doesn't have to be all in one. Right? Or if my partner I'm with isn't very secure base, then I never get it in my life at all. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that explanation. That was eye-opening. I thought I had a good grasp on it from reading the book, but that was brilliant. Thank you.
I think that happened in our relationship too, when I had to pivot pretty suddenly after 2 car accidents. Could no longer teach in the classroom and had to find a new career. And so we made the decision together to pursue coaching. And Greg had already been doing some work with male vulnerability, public speaking. And when that shift happened for him, I was able to encourage him to join me in the coaching business. And it was really a great, pivot for both of us, because we were able to have that support.
Yeah.
And not be so afraid to take the risks, right?
Yeah. It's easier to take a risk when someone's there holding our hands.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be here. Right. I'll be here to wipe your tears when you come back.
Beautiful.
And there's so many levels of influence on us as individuals. And the nested model really speaks to that very well, I think. And the idea that there's like the relationships, the home, the societal, the cultural, and the global impacts on our self-perception and how we navigate life. There it is, the diagram. But it just, I just want to hear what you have to say about why that's so important. I think in my coaching, I've utilized that more, recognizing the levels that are in play, and especially right now, right?
Right. Yeah, right. The global
You wrote
level.
this during the pandemic, didn't you?
Yeah, well, the last edit was in the pandemic.
Okay.
Right? And as I was getting, the last round of edits, I was like, oh, we should put something in. I already had the model. I was like, but we have to throw a few sentences in about the pandemic, right? Because
Yeah.
now it like was even one extra thing of, yeah, the collective global level, how that is impacting all of our experience of attachment right now, for better or worse, depending on who you're quarantined with or not, who you haven't seen for however long, right? That was a partner, lover, or something like that. Yeah, but I felt like there's something, and the nested model, like in some ways it was my own way of like, how do I make sense of this? Like I knew there was something more I wanted to share than just it's the individual and the relationship levels of attachment, and knew that there's other dimensions like home, community, societal, global that impact whether we can attach or not, case in point, something like racism or poverty, which are not individual issues, right? But they sure as hell show up at the individual level, making it hard to be available or make it hard to trust, right? And be vulnerable with people one-on-one. So yeah, so it came from, there's other things that go on that both impact our attachment in terms of ruptures, or it can be healing of our attachment. And I didn't want this to be missed.
Well, and the healing piece, you say you can look to the other levels.
Yeah.
Right, for healing as well. And I think people forget that a lot. You feel sort of like you're on this island with your relationship, and where do you turn? Well, we're seeing it, I suppose, in the support groups that we're part of and things like that in our online communities right now. But I love that there's a reminder, that we can, we're not alone, and that we can move beyond our relationship and look for support.
Yes. Yeah. And not to, downplay how important those other levels can be, whether again, it's a rupture or a trauma we experience, or that it is, a place that we get healing.
Well, it even opened up a little dialogue between Greg and I about like, when somebody says, let's meet for a date, for example, right? At 9 o'clock at night at this restaurant downtown. Well, for someone who, is a female or female presenting, that might be a real issue because it's dark, because the neighborhood's a little dangerous, perhaps, because they don't feel safe taking public transit at that time or whatever, right? There's so many things that came up out of the discussion around the nested model impacting your safety, your feeling of security just in the world. And that also impacts your relationships. So
yeah, I think it was a comedian that was like, yeah, men on a date are like, oh, am I going to get laid? And females on a date are like, is he going to kill me?
Right.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
It's
the cringy funny. It's the
it's not actually funny, right? We're laughing, but not funny, right?
Yeah, it's not funny. No. And actually, as you were explaining that story, I was thinking to myself, like, that's a completely different experience than what I have, when I go on dates, right? It's just, that doesn't even enter into my brain, right? And in fact, probably the opposite is in my brain. How can I make sure that I'm creating a safe space for the person that I'm going to meet, understanding that they are probably going to be experiencing some of these thoughts and fears and anxieties and whatnot about meeting me, right? And so that's been the gift that I've seen from, my partners going through that, is what can I do to make sure that safety has been created, right? And so that's I don't know if that's part of the nested model per se, but I think it's a larger sort of, it's a larger responsibility that I have about making sure that people around me, I'm creating safe spaces for them, right?
Yeah, that's exactly a part of it. That's how the societal level of gender expectations and gender norms is impacting how you're showing up on a date one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or a same-sex date, let's say, right? Maybe they're not feeling as anxious about each other, will this person kill me or not? But they might be looking around the room of, well, the people around us, what are they going to do when they see us as a same-sex couple on a date, right? And
Right.
there's all
Mhm.
these different ways that these things really make a difference.
They
Wow.
do. And even in choosing the location for the date, right? Could be impacted by that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do I even have a car, right? Do I have access to transportation or money to pay for it or money to take an Uber, right?
Mhm.
Just that's right. We could go on and on. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
Of
it's
just
great.
how many levels are showing up in a date that are often invisible.
Right.
Mm.
And I love that that nested model sort of brings all of that up. It sort of kind of brings that to the surface, and you can take a look at all of those different areas, right? And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ultimately, for me, the book is about connection. And I liked that it was applicable, and we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I want to maybe unpack this a little bit more. But we talked about the fact that it's applicable to all relationship dynamics, not just poly
Hmm.
or CNM, but mono and all of that stuff. And I'm going to ask the question only because I think maybe it's important to maybe take a look at this. But was that intentional? Did you do that when you stepped into this?
Yeah. I mean, what I intentionally did was extracted the mononormativity from the attachment dialogue, right? Or what I'm saying, here are the things you can do, and making sure that it could be applicable specifically to non-monogamous folks, right?
Mhm.
However, then that is also going to be applicable to monogamous folks. And the feedback I'm getting from like monogamous friends who read the book, right, are just like, oh, this is helping us even more so than some of the other stuff, because it's really, we're not just doing structural things for safety and security, we're really getting to the heart of it.
No pun intended.
Exactly.
Or pun
Or
intended.
Right,
intended.
pun intended. Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, it very much was intentional.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess to kind of maybe start wrapping things up a bit here, would you mind sharing with our listeners where they can reach out to you and how they can find a copy of this book for themselves?
Yeah. So you can go to Thorn Tree Press and get the copy of the book. Of course, it's on Amazon and all of those places. I did the narration of the Audible audiobook, and my website is jessicafern.com. So they can contact me through the contact form there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you subscribe to my website, there's different talks and stuff I'll announce when those come out. So it's a good way to stay in touch.
Do you have a
Yeah.
social media presence?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm super low social media. Yeah.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
it right here.
This is happening.
This is
Exactly.
yeah.
It's
It's an
happening.
organic social media,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Yes,
today.
thank
It's just been
you.
so nice to talk to you. I feel like, you've given us some insights, even though we've studied the book quite extensively. And I heartily recommend this book to anybody who's in a relationship of any kind, really. It's not just necessarily intimate relationships. It's super applicable to, your family, your friends, your colleagues. I can see it being very useful in, resolution of conflicts anywhere.
Complex. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I
thank
read
you.
Nonviolent Communication, and I love that. And this book, in my opinion, is on par with that in terms of
Oh,
the
stop
amount
it.
it is. I mean, Rosenberg was just amazing. Like, it was just such an eye-opening experience. But this book, in terms of specific to relationships, was just incredible to me. It was like, oh my gods, like all of this was just. I'm totally a fanboy, and I'm just beyond excited and blessed and grateful to have met you and to be able to have this conversation with you and for you to take the time today to meet with us, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, you two are fabulous. And then for me, it's always more fun when people like have read the book and we can go a little deeper in the conversation. It's a much better conversation than just being like, what's attachment?
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Start us on page 1.
Right, exactly.
Will you read the book to us, Jessica?
Right, exactly.
You're like, yeah, I already did. Buy it on Audible. Right?
Thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your day, Jessica.
Yes, thank you both too. Bye, everyone.
We look forward to the workbook. And remember,
choose love
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions. And remember to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Now Relationship Support and Advice for All.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and leannemillion.com,
or follow us on Instagram at gregmillion.lifecoach
and at Leanne Million.
She froze again. It's a great shot to freeze on, though.
It is a great look at that smile.
Yeah, eyes closed, wide smile.
Good.
Fantastic.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back.
Okay, good. It wasn't one of those weird.
No,
not
at all. We won't tell her.
I love that slogan.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you again, Jessica. I know you got to go, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. Jesus, I'm just so fucking beside myself right now.
Awesome. Thank you.